Good evening and welcome to this webinar on how to ace GMAT reading comprehension. In this webinar, we talk about key reading strategies that you can apply to improve your comprehension and hence improve your ability in GMAT RC. Now, in reading comprehension, there are very few concepts that are tested, namely actually the three key concepts. One is main point, the second is detail, and the third is inference. And to make sure that you're ready for this webinar, we did send a few video lessons your way on main point concepts. If you have not gone through those video lessons, I recommend that you go through them. Post this webinar, these video lessons are a part of your free trial. We also have some upcoming free sessions. We have a quant workshop that is tomorrow, so 24 hours from now. And think of this workshop as a proctored mock test in which we talk about how we first evaluate where you currently are, then we identify your weaknesses and your strengths. And based on that data, we give you a personalized plan as to how you can go from your current score to your target quant score. Essentially, we tell you how much time should you be spending in each section, what should you be looking for with regards to abilities in the respective sections, etc., etc. Then next week we have a webinar on how to pre-think assumptions. That webinar is a week from now, which is next Saturday, 9th of February. Both of these webinars are very popular webinars. And again, this is a free session, so it's quite heavily attended. I have about 140 students in the webinar right now. And to make sure that we do justice to this group as a whole, we ask a few leading questions. One of them is when do you plan to take the test? The other one is, what is your target GMAT score? If you haven't responded to either one of these questions, please do so now. Okay, with regards to the first question, what I really see is about 50% of the class over here has more than 45 days before the test, which is a significant amount of time. And more than 36% or more than 37% now, which is the biggest group here, has more than 60 days. We have a few folks who have their exam right away, but other than that, we have a healthy number of people in each group. Then with regards to the target GMAT score, what I can really see is the most popular score group is the 730 to 750. We have a significant number of people in the 660 to 700, 710, 720, and the 760 plus group as well. With that, let's go right into the webinar pane. The screen will have or will be in the process of changing for you. All right. Let me put in a poll question just to make sure that I can see whether the screen has changed for you or not. You should be seeing the title slide which says GMAT Reading Comprehension, and then you should be seeing Agenda Master Key Reading Strategies to Ace GMAT RC. Select yes if you can see that. Select no otherwise. All right, pretty much everyone can see that. And for those of you who cannot, I just recommend that you just use the same join link to join again. If you are on an extremely slow internet connection, sometimes it may take longer or sometimes you may have to join again. All right, with that, let's move forward. There are essentially three parts to this webinar. In the first part, we give you a brief introduction to the company. That's about 15 minutes. In the second part, we go into the core of the webinar, which is when Pyle takes over, who's going to be a main host today. And then in the third part, if you have questions that have not been answered in the first and second part, we do give you the opportunity to ask questions in what we call as an open-ended Q&A, where you can ask questions that are not related to GMAT RC, but rather are related to other aspects of verbal or quant, or about your B school admissions or any other aspect of it. So with that, let's go right into the first part. As you go into the first part, let me introduce my team that we have over here. My name is Rajat Sadana. I am one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be a co-host today. We also have Pyle Tandon, who's one of GMAT Club's top-rated GMAT experts, and she's going to be your main host today. She, by the way, happens to be the other co-founder of e-GMAT. Along with us, we have Shraddha, who's another subject matter expert, and she's uh, going to help us during this webinar as well. And Sandeep, who's a GMAT strategy expert, and he's going to assist us during this webinar, ensuring that all your questions are answered. So earlier on, we asked this question that what's your target GMAT score, and more than 50% of the folks wanted to get a score of 720 or higher. Now, statistically, only 6% of the people get to that score, and this is despite the fact that that median scores at top B schools have shown an upward trend over the last 5 years, and this year has been no different. Here is some data from 2018 or the second half of 2018, more or less. So what is it that people who get to those scores do? A good number of them use e-GMAT. Why do we say that? When you look at data on key forums, which is GMAT Club and Be the GMAT, you're going to actually come to a very similar conclusion. The first data point that we recommend that you look at is the number of verified reviews over the last 3 years. So when you look at the number of verified reviews and compare e-GMAT to other major prep companies, what you're going to realize is that there are more verified reviews for e-GMAT than are for all these companies combined. Similarly, if you look at the number of success stories, again, you're going to see a very similar picture. More success stories mention e-GMAT than do mention all these other major prep companies combined. And the success stories are only over the last 12 months. So what makes our students more successful? I think if there were one thing that would make our students more successful, it is our approach to GMAT preparation. Now, if you think about the approaches to GMAT preparation, or what we call as learning architectures, you're going to find that there are predominantly two different architectures of learning that exist. One is what we call as a book-based architecture, and the second is a private tutoring-based architecture. Now, when you look at most of the other online courses that exist today, even though they are audiovisual, even though they are interactive to a degree, when you look at the core learning architecture that they follow, you're going to find that they follow pretty much the age-old book-based approach. When you evaluate e-GMAT, one thing they're going to realize is it conforms a lot more with this private tutoring-based architecture. Now let's see how these two architectures differ with regards to helping you ace the GMAT, and why is one architecture more effective than the other. So to do that, let's kind of take a student's journey from going from a 600 to a 720. Now, if you want to go from a 600 to a 720, a 120-point improvement, which is, I think, a reasonably significant improvement overall, there are a few things that you'd have to do right. First of all, you'll have to create a path to your goal. Then you'll have to learn all the relevant concepts. Then, once you've learned the concepts, you need to learn how to apply those concepts. And you'll have to learn application to the extent that you've attained a level of mastery that is among the top 6 percentile of test takers. Why? Because you are aiming for a score of 720 or higher. So let's see how the book-based approach tackles this challenge, starting from creating the path to your goal. Now, a book-based approach is all about autonomy, which means when you start studying from books, you may get some study plans, but is that study plan customized to you, or to customize the study plan is something that you have to do. So you essentially decide this path towards your goal. Now, once you've decided that path towards your goal, you learn concepts. Now, there are a good number of books that will teach you concepts really well, but the burden of validation as to whether you've learned those concepts or not relies completely on you. One area where I felt that books falter or rather fall short most is when it comes to teaching the application of concepts. Just the very nature of books does not conform very well to teaching concepts, and a lot of people who study using books, they basically do a ton of practice as a means to master application. The last piece with regards is evaluation of mastery. So are you amongst the top 6 percentile of students or not? And a lot of people who study using books use mock tests as the only means to evaluate their mastery, which means that they study, and towards the end of their preparation, they take mock tests to determine whether they have actually learned well enough or not. Now let's see how a private tutoring based architecture tackles these challenges. When you work with a good private tutor assesses your strengths and weaknesses and creates a personalized study plan in which uh, you, he ensures that you devote enough time to tackling your weakness. Then a good private tutor teaches you concepts and gives you feedback on areas that you still need to work on. So while teaching, a good private tutor is always evaluating you. One area where a private tutoring-based architecture really trumps the book-based architecture is in the application of concepts. Good private tutor tells you how should you approach a question, what should you do in step 1, step 2, and step 3. And again, a good private tutor constantly does this while evaluating you on this and giving you feedback. And then a good private tutor serves you focused practice and tells you when it is time to move from one module to another. So while you learn the same content in both these approaches, the extent of personalization, the extent of application that you learn in a private tutor-based approach is a lot more than what you do in a book-based approach. Now let's see why we say that most of the other prep courses are based around a book-based approach, while e-GMAT is based on this private tutoring-based architecture. Again, let's take the same example of going from 600 to 720. So if you are someone who's at 600 and who wants to go to 720, the first thing that you have to figure out is how do you get to that score of 720? In at e-GMAT, we built this tool called GMAT Planner that shows you the various ways to get to 720. And out of the numerous ways that GMAT Planner gives out, here are two more popular means to get there. One is what we call as a verbal driven approach. The other is a quant driven approach. Let's say the student chooses the quant driven approach. Why? Because he's stronger in quant than he is in verbal. And he says this is the approach that makes most sense for me. So the scores that the student is aiming for are Q50 and V38. Now we then determine how would the student get to a Q50 and a V38. So to get to a Q50, there are about 5 combinations that exist, and this student chooses to excel in arithmetic and do really well in algebra or geometry. Similarly, on the verbal side, the student decides to excel in sentence correction, do really well in critical reasoning, and just do slightly above average in reading comprehension. So when you do this, your GMAT preparation is no longer a black box in which you're studying and taking marks towards the end and hoping that you get to that 720 score. It's a set of 5 neatly defined milestones. If you hit those milestones, you will get to that 720 score. This is the screenshot of GMAT Planner. Again, the same data that you saw on the previous slide is displayed in GMAT Planner as well. This tool actually has a neural network running in the back end that allows you to go through all of these permutations and combinations. So when you do this, your personalized GMAT preparation or your GMAT journey becomes a journey from going to from a certain starting level, let's say 50 percentile in sentence correction, to that 90 percentile in SC, and so on and so forth in reading comprehension. It's a lot more focused. You know what you are trying to achieve, and correspondingly, you can spend a lot more time on areas where you want to achieve the maximum improvement. It's very clear from this data, once you have this, that you're going to spend more time in sentence correction and critical reasoning than you're going to spend in reading comprehension. Why? Because the extent of improvement that you're looking for is a lot higher over here. So now that you have these targets defined, let's see how we teach concepts. Remember, a private tutor teaches you concepts and gives you feedback while you're learning. Our technology platform is built on a very similar principle. We teach you concepts. You see the first few video lessons over here. And then while teaching you concepts, we evaluate you through these quizzes and we give you feedback on your performance over here. Again, everything over here is based on data for you. The time that you take over here is capped on watching the video lesson is captured over here. This is not the time for the video lesson. 1,000 people would have 1,000 different times displayed because they spend a different extent of time on reviewing the solutions and watching the videos. Once you've learned the concepts, we give you a practice at a concept level. Again, it's an evaluation of a combination of concepts, the 4 concepts that you just studied over here. Now, this is the subject verb module in it, in the e-GMAT course. Now, let's take another very popular online course by Magoosh. Again, very similar set of concepts related to subject verb. What you really see is, a lot less coverage, but more than that, there's no feedback over here. And this time that you see is essentially the time of the video, not the time that you studied this video. So essentially, when you think about it, this reads a lot more like a book. Let's talk about application. Remember, a private tutor teaches you how to apply the concept that you've learned. What do you do in step 1, step 2, and step 3? To do the same, we build these special entities called application files, which work like a private tutor. We teach you how do you apply those concepts. When you see a question, what do you do in the first step? What do you do in the second step? And so on and so forth. And you'll see some of that application in the context of reading comprehension over here. Then we evaluate you on your ability to apply those concepts. And then we serve official questions to you, which test the same concepts. Again, we teach you application, we evaluate you on that, and then you get further practice on official questions as well. By the time you're done with this, if you do this properly, there's no reason why you will not have mastered the subject verb module. And this is how every module is architected in the e-GMAT course, whether it's a quant or a verbal module. When you look at the Magoosh course, what you rarely see is just one quiz. There's no score provided to you. It's a quiz with 5 questions that caters to not just subject verb, but also to auxiliary verbs, pronouns as well. Again, the goal here is not to give you feedback, but just to provide you with practice. Now let's talk about evaluation of mastery. Once you've learned the concepts, applying the concepts, you've got to figure out whether you've reached that 90 percentile level or not, because that is what you set out to do. You're not here to learn sentence correction. You're here to get to that 90 percentile level. And to help you evaluate your ability, we have created these quizzes, which we call as ability quizzes, in which we evaluate not just your ability score, but we also tell you how well you're doing in various aspects of sentence correction. So in this case, it's very clear that the student hasn't reached 90 percentile because he needs to do better in comparison. Once you get this focus feedback, you can focus your energy and comparisons for a couple of days, come back, take another ability quiz, and track your improvement. So what this does is it gives you a data point at a point in time in your preparation, and it tells you where should you focus next. So now you can see while both the approaches teach the same concepts to you, why the private tutor-based approach leads to a lot more success. Now, who's created all this content? 4 out of GMAT Club's top 5 rated instructors have created this content. Instructors who've been reviewed a lot more frequently on GMAT Club. So while only 6% of the people score 720 or higher, a good percentage of them do use e-GMAT. We are starting our next batch of verbal, quant, and GMAT live prep courses next week. For those of you who want to download the batch calendars, you guys can download the same over here. With that, I've come to the end of my introduction. If you want to stay updated with all things e-GMAT, I recommend that you connect with me on my LinkedIn. I have close to 10,000 students connected with me on my LinkedIn. We also post 4 to 5 articles every week on my LinkedIn as well. With that, I'd like to invite Payal to start the second part of this webinar. I'm going to mute myself for about 45 seconds so that Payal can transition into the main speaker's role.
Hello, good morning, good evening, and welcome everyone to Reading Comprehension webinar. And thank you, Rajat, for that wonderful introduction. My name is Payal Tandon, and I will be your main host in this part of the session. All right, so let's begin now. Before I go ahead with teaching you the reading comprehension strategy so that you can ace reading comprehension, I would like to understand what your comfort level in reading comprehension is today. And for that, I'm going to ask you some questions. Okay, so I am going to get the poll ready here. Just give me a few seconds. All right. So my first question to you is, how many of you enjoy reading comprehension? By that, what I mean is, let's say according to your study plan, it's decided that tomorrow you will start preparing for RC. How many of you get excited at that prospect? All right, not an overwhelming majority does not. Well, I'm actually surprised. And usually, about 80% of the class says no, we are not at all excited about RC. But in this batch, that number has actually reduced to about 60% of the class. So it seems that we have more people comfortable towards for RC in this webinar than in my other batches. So good. All right, that's nice. So let me ask you another question. For those of you who do not enjoy RC, why is it that you do not enjoy RC? What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about RC and the fact that it doesn't interest you, or it seems to be a laborious task? Too complex, time consuming, reading speed is slow, too verbose, confuses a bit with too much detail, reading's lengthy, too much information, get lost, dry topics, it's lengthy and time taking when the subject is not interesting, complex text. Okay, so it's the very nature of the very characteristic of RC that you have to go through the passage, and the passages are not really your easy, comfortable read. The passages require you to focus, and passages are pretty dense. So that very characteristic of RC is what makes you feel uncomfortable about it. Okay. Um, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you, so I would request you to read through the 5 options that you see on the screen and tell me which ones do you associate with the most. Again, these are just different ways of getting similar kind of information, just so I understand where you guys are at. All right, let's let's get a few more responses here. All right, I'm going to broadcast the results now. So it appears that the choice which is selected by maximum number of you is choice A, not enough time, reading speed is slow. And then beyond that, passages are too complex and choices are very close, are pretty close to one another. And then we have not enough retention as the choice which is not selected by that many people. Limited familiarity, it seems, doesn't get in the way of many students. All right, that's good. Now, if you think about it, whenever you have to solve a problem, so frankly, there is a problem that exists today, which is that you are not very comfortable with preparing for reading comprehension, right? Now, whenever you set out to solve a problem, you always have to figure out what is the root cause behind that problem, right? What is the fact that is causing the problem? And for that, we have to get to the bottom of the problem itself, right? Now, it appears so that you feel that the very characteristic of RC, that you have to go through the huge amount of text, and the text is not very easy is not very comfortable for you to go through. That very characteristic of RC is getting in the way of you not being able to perform well in RC, or not even being able to get excited at the prospect of preparing for RC. So how do we take care of that aspect? The way to take care of that aspect is to understand first what is the difference between an active reader and a passive reader. Because if you understand that aspect, you will be able to come closer to the solution of this problem. So how many of you understand what is the difference between an active reader and a passive reader? And what is your understanding? All right, I'm getting some good answers here. Active reader is engaged while reading, very well. Thinking in summaries, okay. Active reader gets the gist of each sentence. Active reader notes the transitions. Attentive reading versus general reading. That is very well put, good. Active is thinking, passive is just consuming. All right, that is also very well put. Involved in reading, active reader looks for some more information. An active reader is well aware of the direction and the sense. All right, well, all very good answers. Comprehending simultaneously, being passionate about the passage. All right, very good. I must say that I'm getting some really good answers from this batch. Very nice. All right, now tell me, why is it that you are not an active reader? Okay, so let me ask you this question. If you were an active reader would do well in RC, is that a true statement? Yes or no? An active reader will do well in reading comprehension. Yep, that is the true statement. Now, if you know what an active reader is or what an active reader does, why is it that you know that an active reader will be able to do well in RC, then why is it that you are not an active reader? What is stopping you from becoming an active reader? And this is where the crux of the whole problem lies. Not sure when to take notes, less time, concentration, lazy, text is complicated, not enough time, depends on topic. All right. So I don't believe we've come very close to understanding the reason of the problem, okay, the cause of the problem. But we are not there yet. And that's where I'm going to help you out. Okay. You're absolutely right that an active reader is the one who's going to be doing well in RC versus a passive reader who is going to struggle with RC. A number of you today are not able to become active readers. Okay. The way to solve that problem is to get you to become an active reader. And for that, we have to do two things. We have to teach you how is it that you get maximum from the passage when you read it the first time. For that, I'm going to show you reading strategies, and I'm going to demonstrate these reading strategies through two small passages. Okay. Once I do that, I'm going to teach you how is it that you use that information to answer questions. Okay. For that, I'm going to demonstrate a main point question and an inference question. And towards the end, I'm going to give you a study plan for you to prepare for reading comprehension. Okay. So if you understand the goal of this webinar, it is really to make you become an active reader and to tell you and the way to do that is to tell you what are the missing links. And the most critical missing link that exists today is that you do not know how to read and get the maximum from the dense RC passage that you will definitely encounter when you solve RC questions. That is the key thing. Okay, there are no shortcuts to this. There are no tactics to it. This is the main thing that you have to learn is the facts. Okay, so let me tell you this. The facts don't change. In RC, you are going to get complex passages. You are going to get dense passages. You are going to get passages that you will not even worry about if it were not for that particular question. Okay, that's fact number one. Fact number two. You cannot read those passages in a casual manner and get the same information out that you need to so that you can answer the questions. That's fact number two. Fact number three, you have to prepare for RC if you want to get to that 720, 740 or 760 score. Okay, there is no way out of that. Okay, so given these three facts, the only way that you can prepare for RC, or that you can get excited about the prospect of preparing for RC, is that you need to learn how to get the maximum from the passage. And that is going to be our primary focus in this webinar. Okay, so just want to set certain things straight. In this webinar, we are not going to solve 3 or 4 lengthy passages that you see in the test. Okay, we are going to be focusing on teaching you the strategies. So for that, we have created these small but dense passages so that we can get through the point, we can communicate the point that we are here to communicate. Okay, so I'm just setting the expectation, right? Don't expect to solve 12 questions in RC. You'll be solving only 2 questions in this webinar. But I assure you, by the end of the webinar, you will have a fairly good idea about how to prepare for RC and how to actually master RC. Okay, everyone with me? Yes, no? Okay. By the way, I must say that you all are very interactive. You all are very interactive here. You're telling me what you're answering the questions in a very, very active manner. So thank you for that. I was trying to find the right word here. Okay. So let's get into the reading strategies. Your journey to acing GMAT RC starts with having the right attitude towards RC. Okay. There are so many of you who are scared of RC, who consider RC to be a nemesis, that one thing that stops you from getting that V40 or that 750 score. If you really want to get to that 750 score, you need to change this attitude towards RC. Okay. Now, what is the attitude that I'm talking about? What I'm talking about is that when you see the passage, the first thing that you have to do is you have to forget about what your general interests are, what you are generally comfortable with. You have to forget all about that. When you see the passage on the screen, in the entire world, in your entire life, that's the only matter of text, only portion of text that matters to you. That's how you have to approach RC. You have to be completely immersed in the passage. Okay, by that what I mean is you just forget about all your, and I'm repeating myself because this is the most important thing, and no one can teach you how to get immersed in passage. It is just something which you have to set your mind at. Okay, it's the same thing as, you know, there would be people telling you to work out and all that, but if you are not dedicated to it, if you're not devoted to it, no matter how much people tell you, you would not be able to get yourself out of the house and then start and then work out or go for that run. Okay, so this has to come from within you. Okay, get immersed in the passage. Okay, so that's something which you have to make sure you do before you read any passage. Once you do that, then the next set of strategies are going to help you understand the passage in the right amount of, to the right extent, okay, or to the appropriate extent. Okay, is this point clear? Yes or no? I know you may be wondering, why can't I teach you how to get immersed? But frankly, this is something which is your own control of your mind. You have to control your mind that you love this topic. You want to know what the author is going to say next. Okay, so the moment you do that, all the other strategies are going to help you in getting to the right amount of information from the passage. Okay, so let's go to the next set of strategies, which are the reading strategies. So we've taken care of the attitude aspect. Now we're going to move into the reading strategies. Okay, there are 3 reading strategies. The first one, and I'm going to go through each in a step-by-step manner. The first one is understand sentence structure. And before I tell you about these reading strategies, let me tell you one thing. Reading and writing go hand in hand. If you're reading a good piece of text, by good piece of text, what I mean is that a text that is written using the right kind of writing strategies, okay, then you can actually translate those writing strategies, because you understand what those writing strategies are, into your reading strategies, so that you understand everything that the author intended to communicate. So that is what we have done. We have taken the writing strat, and we know from our analysis of GMAT passages, we know that each and every passage on the GMAT is written beautifully. Each and every piece of content is so beautifully connected to one another. And we see the writing strategies applied so very well on GMAT RC passages, and I can say that confidently about GMAT RC passages. Okay, and that's why these reading strategies work so very well on RC passages. Okay, if you were to apply these strategies on content that is not written appropriately, then those strategies are not going to work. Okay, so let me talk about the reading strategy one. Understand the sentence structure. Now this needs to be done on a sentence level. By understand the sentence structure, what I mean is that every time you read a sentence, do not think of a sentence as one single entity. How many of you do that today? How many of you, whenever you come across a sentence in a reading comprehension passage, how many of you consider a sentence as a single entity? Okay, so about 50% of the class. Okay, so those of you who do not, very good. Those of you who do consider a sentence as a single entity, you need to change that approach. You need to break down the sentence into its individual ideas. Because remember, an RC passage is not going to consist of simple sentences. It is going to consist of pretty lengthy, dense sentences, right? So essentially, your building block of an RC passage needs to be an idea. Okay, one idea is a building. So ideas are a building block, and the author of the RC passage can put together those multiple ideas, 4 or 5 ideas, into a sentence. Okay, so that's how you have to approach a single sentence. And for that, you need to understand the sentence structure. Okay, now if you think about it, and if you are familiar with our sentence correction approach, in sentence correction, we talk about understanding the sentence structure of the sentence, right? So, and for that, we have the specialized course called as Master Comprehension. So if you follow that approach is going to help you in reading comprehension as well. Okay, so that's the first thing. Always break down the sentence into its individual ideas, understand those ideas, and then put together those ideas and then move forward. Okay. The second one is predict the thoughts through keyword. And again, this comes directly from one of the writing strategies that the authors utilize, and that is that when you present information in the passage, the author should be using appropriate connecting words so that it's very clear to the reader as to what the author is trying to communicate. So we have actually utilized that writing strategy and converted that into a reading strategy that you should predict the thoughts through keywords. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, let's say you are the author has presented a positive aspect of a certain idea, okay, and then he says, having said that. Now, whenever you see the word having said that or that keyword, you pause for a moment and then you think about, okay, the author has already mentioned certain positive aspects. Now he's saying having said that. So just before you read what the author is going to say next, you pause and you think, okay, what could the author be talking about next? So what do you think the author is going to be talking about next? All right, let's get a few more responses here. Absolutely right. Negative aspects or contradiction or something that's not very positive. Absolutely right. Okay. Now it's not going to be effect of positive because he said having said that. Okay. So it's not going to be effect of positive. An opposite idea, obviously. Good. So when you do this activity, you ensure that you are actively engaged with the author. You are in that conversation with the author. When you get into that mode, that's when you will automatically start to understand what the author is communicating. Okay. Now, you may wonder, a thought may come into your mind. Why do I need to pause? I know what the author has already written. It's not like I have to wait for the author to tell me. The author has already written what he's going to say next. So why should I pause? Why should I waste that moment of time? And that's a very logical question. How many of you have that question in your mind, by the way? I'm predicting here that this is a question that may come into your mind. How many of you have that question? Good. All right. I'm glad. So the reason why you need to pause is that as when you take these moments of pause, right, what you're doing is you're summarizing the information that you have read so far. Intuitively you're doing that, okay, because you are thinking about, okay, the author talked about something positive, now he said, having said that means that what follows next is going to be something negative, or something not so positive, right? So what you're doing is you are summarizing the information. You are now thinking about what the author is going to say next. You formulate an idea in your mind. Now, most likely that idea is going to be correct because you are hinging on these keywords. It's not going to happen that the author is going to say, there are no two thoughts about it. The author has said, having said that, it has to be a negative after that. The author cannot really, a keyword works only a certain way. If there is hence, that means there's going to be a result. If there is but, that means there's going to be a contradiction, right? So there is only one thing that can happen, one specific thing that can happen when you pause on these keywords, right? So when you do that activity, you are preparing your mind to absorb what the author is going to come next. So this activity is playing a twofold role. The first one is it's helping you summarize, which means that it's helping you cement those thoughts a lot better in your mind. The second is that it's priming your mind to accept what's going to come next. So it sticks better in your mind. Okay. Is this point clear? And again, a lot of what I'm talking about is how our mind works. Okay. So, good. All right. So that's the beauty of predicting the thoughts through keywords. Okay. Now, once you do that, the next thing that you need to do is summarize and predict what's next. And again, you may think that 2 and 3 are almost the same. They are not. Summarize and predict what's next. The sole purpose of that is to avoid having any information overload in your mind. Okay. By that, what I mean is, let's say that you read this text, and until here, and your passage is, let's say, this long. I want you to pause after this point over here. Okay, I want you to pause here so that you can absorb the information that you've read. You can summarize it in your own words, and then you move forward. Maybe at this point in time, you take notes, or you erase certain notes that you've taken, or something that you do so that whatever you've read in these lines is absolutely clear in your mind. Okay, when you do this activity, you are actively engaged in the passage, and you make sure that you have understood everything that you've read so far. Okay, now you may ask, should I stop after every sentence? Should I stop after every paragraph? What is the stopping point? Stopping point depends upon you. The moment you start, you have to stop feeling, you should never ever, when you're reading an RC passage, should you feel, oh my god, I'm reading so much information, I have no idea what I've just read. You need to stop that from happening. Okay, it's the same thing that when we are eating food, right? What is the right amount of food depends upon an individual, right? How much food your body can actually take in, right? So it's the same thing over here. How much food in terms of the text can your brain absorb before it needs to, before you move on and give it more food. Okay, so that's not exactly the same, but that's the idea, right? So whenever you start to feel that you are getting an information overload, you have to, means that you are not pausing enough. That should be an indication that you're not pausing enough. You're not pausing and summarizing enough. So read a substantial amount of text. Substantial, again, depends upon your own capabilities, and then move forward. Summarize and then move forward. Okay. So if you think about it, these are the 3 reading strategies, okay, and very, very important reading strategies. And the first one is to be done on the sentence level, okay. The second one has to be done within a paragraph, okay. The third one should be done within a paragraph, again it depends, as well as among the paragraphs. Okay, you should definitely make sure that after every paragraph you stop and you summarize in your own words what that paragraph said. Okay, so let me ask you one thing. How many of these reading strategies you were not aware of before this session? Write down 1, 2, and 3. Which ones were you not aware of before the session? And you can write multiple as well. Okay. All right, good. I'm glad. Now, do these strategies make sense to you in principle? I know I haven't demonstrated these and we are getting right into the demonstration aspect, but in principle, do they make sense to you? Okay, good. Now let me ask you one thing, because I know there is certain aspect that may be bothering you right now. How many of you are sitting there in front of your computers and thinking, yes, this makes sense. In principle, this looks okay. But would I have the time to do all of this, given that GMAT is a timed exam? How many of you are thinking that? All right. So almost everyone. So let me address the elephant in the room before I move ahead to demonstrate these strategies. Okay. Initially, when you begin doing this, so when you start doing this, you are definitely going to take more time. There's no second thoughts about it. If I would be absolutely wrong if I told you that you can apply these strategies and still solve your RC passage within the 4 or the 6 minutes that you have slated for that RC passage. I would be absolutely wrong. And I'm not saying that at all, okay? Initially, when you do this, you are going to take time. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. It all depends upon what your current skill level in this particular skill is, okay? But as you move ahead, as you practice these strategies, you, after about, let's say, 10 or 15 passages, okay, maybe 20 passages, it may take up to 20 passages for some of you, okay, you are the 21st passage or the 11th passage that you do, you are going to see that now you have cut down on the time to answer the questions, okay? So understand this. It is going to take time initially when you're building up the skill. But once you've built the skill, you are going to take less time to solve an RC passage than what you take today. And you're going to be able to solve the RC passage with a lot better accuracy than what you do today. That is what my guarantee to you is. Okay. And to substantiate that, let me ask you one more question. Tell me, in the recent past, or maybe since your childhood years, one skill that you have that you've learned, one extracurricular skill. Let's talk about that. It could be swimming, it could be playing tennis. So tell me one skill. So write that down. Okay, so let's read through some. Running, playing badminton, dancing, cricket, prioritizing, playing guitar, music, badminton, yoga. Now let me ask you this. How many of you were able to do each your specific skill, right? Say, let's say running, at the or whatever skill you've listed out over here, with the same amount of at the same pace as what you do right now when you are definitely skilled at doing it. For example, if it were running, how many of you were able to run at the same speed that you run when you started learning that skill versus now that you're skilled at it? You never started learning that skill thinking about, oh my God, I have to play guitar like a pro right on the onset, right on the first day that I built my skill. Or you never started learning how to swim thinking that I need to be able to take that lap in a definite amount of time as the pros do, right? You gave yourself time. That is the same thing. Consider applying reading strategies or learning about these reading strategies, learning how to apply these reading strategies as a skill that you're building. The moment you switch gears in your mind towards this, you are going to absorb this a lot more better. You're not going to have unrealistic expectations either for you or for the process. Okay? All right then. So I hope I've been able to address the elephant in the room. Is that right? Yes or no? Has the concern been addressed? Good. I'm glad to hear that. All right. So now let's move on to applying these strategies on a reading comprehension passage and look at the word that is highlighted here, slowly. You have to apply these reading strategies slowly, because if you start to apply them fast, you are going to falter, you're going to fall, and you're going to not be able to apply them. Okay, so slowly is the key. Now, there is one tactical strategy that can make your life a bit easier on these passages, which is to shorten the technical terms. Many a times the author uses long technical terms, and the idea of using those terms is just to throw you off, just to make sure that those terms act as speed bumps as you're reading the passage. So to avoid that, to happen, you need to shorten the technical terms so that you you make the passage easier to read. Okay, so with that, let's move on to the first passage that we have, and the passage is pretty short. I want you to apply these reading strategies slowly, and I want you to do this. Can you click on no in this yes no poll? That way I know how many of you are engaged in reading the passage. All right, sounds good. Now, I'm not going to give you a specific amount of time. I'm going to see when about 50% of the class is done reading the passage. I'm going to give you a few seconds warning, and then we're going to go forward. Okay. All right, so as soon as you're done reading the passage, click on yes button over there. Now you see enter your notes poll window here. When you are reading the passage, feel free to take down your notes here, or maybe you can take down your notes in your scratch pad. But after you're done reading the passage, summarize those notes and put them over here so that I understand what it is that you have taken away from the passage. Okay? All right, so there you go. All right, I'm going to show the question now. Here's the question. I'm going to get the question pod. Last few seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, so here are the results of your answers here. So choice D, as you can see from the poll, choice D is the correct answer, and about 50% of the class selected choice D. Not just 4 people selected choice A, and then between choices B and C, almost similar number of people selected choices B and C. So good. So now tell me, how was it to solve this question? And we are going to come back, we're going to discuss the question in detail. But first, we're going to apply the reading strategies together on this passage. But first, tell me, how was your experience in applying reading strategies? Give me something more concrete. First time, yeah, so confusion between options B and D. Okay, that's for solving the question, but I want to understand, how was it to apply the reading strategies? I applied short and technical terms a lot. Good. Too short passage to apply strategies? Well, not really. I'm going to show you. Good, but I had to read the passage twice, and that's okay. Reading the passage. So when I say read the first time, I don't mean that you cannot read a particular part of the sentence, particular part of the passage twice. No, it doesn't mean that. What I mean by getting the maximum from the passage in the first read itself is that before you look at the question, you should have a solid understanding of the passage. It should not happen that you are looking for towards the question and the answer choices to help you understand the passage. That should not happen. Okay. Elimination method, time consuming, read the passage many times and confused between B and D. Okay. So after reviewing the initial words bordering on the extreme one definition, now I now realize that that gave away the answer choice to be D. Very good. All right, you understood the key aspect of the passage. And again, we'll go into the details of this. Okay, good. So very nice. Let's thank you for your candid response, by the way. So let's now get into solving this particular question here. So understanding the passage. Sorry about that. So give me 1 second here. All right. Bordering on the extreme, one definition of ethnocentrism. Now I'm going to pause here. Let me change the color here. Bordering on the extreme, one definition of ethnocentrism. I'm going to pause here and I'm going to understand why has the author said bordering on the extreme? What do you think is the role of bordering on the extreme? One rare definition. What else? Extreme viewpoint. Absolutely right. It is one of the definitions. It's an extreme definition. Absolutely right. Okay. It's an extreme definition. It's a radical view. Showing extreme point. Yes. Okay. But he is evaluating. That's not correct. There is no evaluation happening. All he is saying is evaluation. Whenever you evaluate, you consider the positives and the negatives. Okay. Here he's just saying, the author is simply saying that something borders on the extreme. What borders on the extreme? Definition. Definition of what? Definition of ethnocentrism. And what does bordering on the extreme means? It means that it's an exaggerated definition. Okay, so you take that, you understand that whatever I'm going to say next is actually exaggerated. Okay, so he's already presenting that, don't think that this is the generally accepted definition. It's an exaggerated definition. So he's giving his view on that. Okay, so that is the importance of understanding what bordering on the extreme means. Now tell me, how many of you focused on understanding the significance of bordering on the extreme? How many of you did that when you read the passage on your own? Not many of you did that. And I can see that from the notes that you have put in the notes pod. Okay, so this is something which you have to be very, very certain about. No matter what the length of that particular segment is, you have to understand each and every the role played by each and every aspect in the reading comprehension passage. Okay, it's this level of detail that would lead you to not worry about the incorrect answer choices. Okay, when you don't do analysis to this level of detail, that is when you feel that the answer choices are very close. So what I want you to write down in your notes right now is that if when you are solving RC passages, right, if you feel, when you get to a question, if you feel that the answer choices are very close, that is an outcome. Outcome of what? Outcome of inappropriate amount of understanding that you got from reading the passage. So instead of worrying about that question, you then need to go back to your passage and read it properly by applying the reading strategies appropriately. Okay, so what I've just told you is how is it that when you are practicing or when you are studying for RC, when you're solving a question, when you're solving an RC passage, how is it that you should take down information from your results that you're getting from answering the question? The feelings that you have, oh my God, this is an information overload. Oh my God, all these answer choices appear so close, or three answer choices appear so close. As soon as that happens, that's an indication that you haven't read the passage in the right manner. So you need to go back to the passage. Okay. All right. Now let's continue. Bordering on the extreme, one definition of ethnocentrism considers it a schismatic in-group out-group differentiation in which, now I'm going to pause here because in which, if I've read in which, what's going to come next? I've read in which, what's going to come next? Explanation, absolutely right. Explanation of absolutely right. So let me just pause before I see more description or more explanation. Let me first understand what the author has said from this point to this point, right? Considers it. Now what does it refer to? What does it refer to? It doesn't refer to differentiation, it refers to ethnocentrism. Absolutely right. Consider, so one definition, exaggerated definition of ethnocentrism considers ethnocentrism a schismatic in-group out-group differentiation. So when I read this in-group out-group differentiation, all I can simply simplify this as, okay, differences between people inside and outside the group. Okay. Now schismatic. How many of you know the meaning of schismatic? And you don't really need to know the meaning of schismatic to understand this passage because you can simply replace schismatic as some kind of in-group out-group differentiation. Okay, so in which internal cohesion, now I read further. Now in which is going to describe what? Based on what you've read, before you even go here, you have to understand what it is that you're reading. You are going to be reading about the differentiation, the characteristic of the differentiation. Okay, so good. In which internal cohesion, relative peace, solidarity, loyalty, and devotion to the in-group. Okay, look at this. In-group, the differentiation was between the in-group and the out-group, and here in-group is already here. Okay, are correlated, are linked with a state of hostility toward outgroups. Okay, so that's the differentiation that's being talked about. What is it? Now, how are you going to, there's many words over here. This part itself forms about 70 to 80% of the passage. Now, how are you going to summarize internal cohesion, relative peace, solidarity, loyalty, and devotion? How are you going to do that? Good characteristics. Absolutely right. Positive emotions, right? Positive emotions. These are not features of in-group. These are emotions towards in-group. Okay. So those are not characteristics. Those are in which internal cohesion, loyalty, devotion to the in-group. So those are not features. Those are positive feelings towards the in-group. Okay. That's how you're going to summarize it. Positive feelings towards the in-groups. positive emotions or love for your own people, right? That's how you're going to summarize this. Okay. Now, how many of you you applied the tactical strategy of shortening the technical terms here? How many of you did that? How many of you did internal cohesion as IC, relative peace as RP, solidarity as S? Okay, that is not the correct application of the shortening of technical terms. Internal cohesion, relative peace, solidarity, these are not technical terms. These are terms that you're familiar with these terms, right? Relative peace, solidarity, you're very well familiar with these terms. And the way to absorb these terms is to summarize them, right? Instead of using 5 terms, how can you use a single term to explain these terms? Okay, so here you have to apply the summarization tactic. Whereas ethnocentrism, this is a technical term. So you basically simply shorten it up as EC. Okay, so I was going through certain notes and that you had put in, and I saw that some of you had done this thing, IC, RP, S, L, and D. Because again, when you summarize it, that when you shorten these technical terms as IC, RP, S, L, and D, that doesn't help you understand that. But if you summarize these terms as love for your own people, that's when you get to understand what these terms actually signify. Okay, is this point clear? So again, it's very important to know when to apply what strategy. Okay, on what aspects of passage you apply the strategy, the specific strategy. Okay, all right. Okay, so then let's read further. So positive feelings are correlated, which means are linked with a state of hostility, with hatred towards outside people. So love for your own people is linked with hatred towards outside people. Now, what does this mean? This means that if you love your own people, you would hate outside people. That is what the exaggerated definition of ethnocentrism is. Okay. Then, which are often perceived, now this which describes the outgroups, which are often perceived as subhuman and or incorporation of evil. So outgroups are typically considered as evil. Okay, so overall what this passage tells me is that it gives me, sorry for these, it gives me one definition of EC. It indicates that the definition is a bit exaggerated. And according to the definition, the following are correlated. Love for your own people is correlated with hatred towards outside people. Okay. Now, I'm going to get a question pod here, and I want to understand how many of you were able to get to this level of understanding. So let me just get the which ones. Okay. So here's the pod that I want you to put in. So which ones were you not able to get from the passage when you read the passage on your own? Select the ones that you were not able to get. And you can select more than one. Because this is where a lot of insights are going to come about your current skill level and what it is that you need to focus on. Okay, so pay very close attention to this. So I'm going to end the poll now. About 75 people have put in their answers here. Okay, so number one, not many people had difficulties understanding. And if you think about it, one definition is directly given in the passage. This is information that's given to you on a platter. Okay, so there wasn't much of analysis to be done in order to get to this, in order to understand this aspect of the passage. Second one indicates that the definition is a bit exaggerated. This was to be inferred from bordering on the extreme. Okay, and majority of you, about 70% of you, could not draw that inference, which means that you need to be more engaged in the passage. You need to be more dealing with the passage in a more active manner to draw inferences such as these. And again, I use the word inference, but it's not related to the question inference, the inference question. Okay, all this is saying is that you have to understand what the author is saying. Whenever you are reading a passage, think about you being in a conversation with a friend or with a colleague, and a very interesting conversation, a conversation in which you are there to learn something from it. Okay, where you are actively questioning what the colleague is saying, or you are either agreeing with him or you're disagreeing with him. So again, you're actively understanding what your colleague is saying. The same way you have to be, the same mode you have to follow when you are reading an RC passage. Okay, when you read bordering on the extreme, you need to know, what does the author mean when he says bordering on the extreme? Okay, you have to dissect that, you have to understand that. Okay, so this is a skill which you definitely need to build, and you definitely need to work on. Now, the third point, about 50% of the class could not get to, and this one required your skill of summarizing. Okay, there wasn't any inference to be drawn here. You had to simply summarize information. You had to understand what internal cohesion, relative peace, solidarity means. It means that love for your own people is linked with state of hostility towards outside people. Okay, so you had to summarize that information. So again, that's another skill that you need to build on. Okay, is this point clear? Yes or no? Because it's very important for you to, the goal of this session is for you to understand what it is that you're lacking in, and how is it that you can, first you understand what, and then I'm going to help you understanding how you can bridge those gaps. Okay, all right. Now let's come to the question itself, and I'm going to get the poll over here, your answer poll. Okay, so choice A, to criticize a concept. There is no criticism at all. Okay, so there is no, so this choice is absolutely wrong. Let's look at choice B. Choice B, to evaluate the concept of ethnocentrism while enlisting its various features. When does it, what is evaluation? Evaluation happens when you are doing the pros and cons. Now here the author, as we summarize, the author is simply presenting an exaggerated definition. There are no pros and cons. Now, how many of you selected choice B thinking that, okay, we understand that it's pros and cons, and the positive feelings versus the negative feelings that have been expressed in the passage are the pros and the cons? How many of you thought that and selected choice B? So about half of you who selected choice B. And that is taking the information that's given in the passage out of context. Okay, so again, if you don't understand why the author has said what he has said, then the answer choices are going to appear very close to you. Okay, so answer choices are very close is an artifact of you not understanding the passage. I want this to be very clear in your mind. If you understand the passage well, answer choices are not going to be close. That is a fact that I can stand by. Okay, and that is the beauty of you focusing your time, and that's what you'll see when I share certain success stories in this webinar. You're going to see how this leads to your being able to answer an RC passage in less amount of time than if you don't apply the reading strategies. Okay, so choice B is absolutely wrong. Let's look at choice C. To define the concept of ethnocentrism, which leads to hierarchy among social groups. Now, for main point questions, for certain choices, it would make sense for you to take the role of the author. Okay. Now, choice C is an attractive choice because it uses the word to define, and because the passage also says a definition. The passage is giving you the definition, so I can understand why you will be attracted towards this choice C. Okay, but before you mark a particular choice as the correct answer, always play the role of the author. By that, what I mean is, think about if you were to define a certain concept. Will you only use an exaggerated definition? If your purpose was to define a certain concept, will you only use the exaggerated definition? Yes or no? No. And again, the question has to be answered for the passage that is given, right? What is the main purpose of the author behind writing the paragraph? Okay, the main purpose, if it were to define, then he would have given a more generally accepted definition. Okay, now you may argue that okay, I can start off with an extreme definition, and then I can provide a more generally accepted definition, right? Yes, you're absolutely right, right? But that is not what the author did here. The author just stopped after giving that exaggerated definition. And you have to answer the question based on the passage that you've just read. Okay, that's why choice C is wrong. Which brings me to choice D, that is to introduce the concept of ethnocentrism by presenting a view on it. Introduce is absolutely correct. Okay, he's giving an exaggerated definition, which means that he's just making an introduction, right? He's just giving one extreme definition, and then as he proceeds on, he may provide more information in the subsequent passages. But right now, this is the passage that is my focus. By presenting a view on it, by presenting that this is an exaggerated definition. So choice D is absolutely correct. Okay. So with this, we have finished analysis of our first passage. Now tell me, what have you taken away from this analysis? Think about it and tell me, what all have you taken away from this analysis? Because remember what the goal of this session is. The goal of this session is that you need to, after you close out this Adobe Connect window, you have a solid idea of how is it that you have to be preparing for RC. Okay, so I want to see that, whether that's happening or not. Stop and summarize, read carefully, pay more attention to details, know pros and cons, even if it was close to be understood. How to go about an RC passage, summarize your understanding, okay? To understand and summarize, pay attention to transition words, okay? Inference and summarization, okay, good. Got the idea of how to follow the process. Very nice. I've learned to apply the strategies in order to get a better understanding of passage before jumping to conclusions. Good. Very nice. So now tell me one more thing. If you feel that if you do have a good understanding of passage, answer choices are very close, will not be a problem. Is that correct? Just want to reiterate this point. If you read the passage well, then the answer choices are very close, will not be a problem. Good. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to skip through this here. At this point, I want to talk about Nishant's experience with RC. Okay, as I said, it's very important. I can say that these strategies work, and I can say it very confidently. I can stand by this. Okay, I will tell you that if you apply them, you are going to get closer to your target GMAT score. But if you hear it from a successful student, okay, then I believe it's going to be more. It's going to make more sense to you. So that's why we talk about these success story interviews in our session, so that you see that okay, these are real people who have applied these strategies, and how is it that they were able to apply these strategies and be successful. Okay, so here is an interview with Nishant, who went from 40 percentile ability in RC to 79 percentile ability in RC, with the confidence that in his last attempt, in which he scored 740, he would have gotten all RCs correct. Okay. Now, when you watch Nishant's interview, what you'll see is that Nishant first faltered while applying the strategies. Why? Because he applied them hurriedly. He did not apply the strategies slowly, and if you don't apply the strategies slowly, you're not applying the strategies at all. That's the key. If RC strategies, if reading strategies have to work, you have to apply them slowly. Okay, it's an oxymoron that I applied the reading strategies fast. That's an oxymoron. It doesn't exist. Okay, so he would read a passage in 2 minutes, and then he would jump to solving questions. He would have to reread the passage to answer the questions, and accordingly he faltered. So, because he wasn't applying the strategy slowly, he was taking 1.5 to 2 minutes per question. And he felt that his understanding was not sound enough to help him answer the questions. And that is when, after hearing from another successful e-GMATer, he started applying the strategies slowly, something that I've been talking about since the very beginning of this session. What he learned the hard way was that reading strategies are a means to the end. So there is no point in rushing through the strategies if the end goal is not being met. And once he changed his mindset, once he gave himself good 4 to 5 minutes to read the passage, he was able to answer the questions in 30 seconds each. That was the level of his confidence and the power of comprehension. Okay. So that's what you're doing. If you think about it, you're simply moving your time from answering the questions to reading the passage. And if you read the passage really well, you wouldn't really need to spend 1.5 to 2 minutes in answering the questions. That time to answer the question is going to be trimmed down to 30 seconds. Okay, that's the beauty of applying the reading strategy slowly. Does this make sense to you? Yes or no? All right, so now let's apply these reading strategies on another passage. Okay, so let's follow the same drill. Click on No over here. All right, let's get a few more no's here so that I want to see more people answer reading the passage. All right, here's the passage and enter your notes here. And after you're done reading the passage, please select on yes, change your vote to yes. There you go. All right, I'm going to give you the question now. Here's the question. I'm going to get you the poll as well. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay. So before we go into the detailed discussion of this passage, let me ask you one more question here. Read the sentence that you see on the screen and then tell me which of the two can you infer. Okay, so I'm going to broadcast the results. Oh, apologize for that. Can you, oh my goodness, what's happening to this poll? So can you please put in your answers once again? So about 64, it's about 64 to 30%. Yes, 70% of the class thinks that choice A is the choice 1 is the correct answer, and 30% think that choice 2 is the correct answer. And this is a very important thing for you to understand regarding inference. Okay. The color blue is considered to have a soothing effect on the moods of most people. When the author says that the color blue is considered, what he means is that some people regard color blue as soothing. He's not saying that everybody thinks, or he's not saying that he thinks that color blue is soothing, or that everybody thinks that color blue is soothing. He's just saying there are some people who think that color blue is soothing. Okay. Because he's saying that only some people think that color blue is soothing, we cannot infer that the color blue is soothing. Only thing that we can infer is that some people regard the color blue as soothing. Okay. Now, another thing which is important is that if, let's say, if the author said the color blue is considered to have a soothing effect on the moods of most people, and rightly so, in that case, the author has given his viewpoint also. The author has said that he also thinks that the color blue is soothing. If that were the case, then you could have inferred, then you will have inferred, you should have inferred choice 2 to be correct. Okay, and we'll talk more about this in the subsequent slide, but because I've already talked in a bit more detail, so let me tell you here. An inference, a correct inference from the passage is something that the author believes in. If the author has simply presented his views, if the author is simply presenting somebody else's views without telling whether he agrees or disagrees with those views, we cannot infer that information from the passage. Inference questions are always from the standpoint of the author. Okay. The next thing is that the author believes in facts. So if the author has stated a fact, then that means that fact can be inferred. He believes in that. So essentially, an inference question is always answering the question, what does the author believe in? So whenever you see an inference question, if you translate that question into what does the author believe in, you are going to get to the right answers. Okay, so now let's go to our passage here. And I'm going to get the short answer poll here. Yes. Ethnocentrism and its canonical variants are deemed to be intimately connected with xenophobia. So I'm going to shorten xenophobia as XP. And I'm going to pause here. Essentially, what this is saying is EC and its variants are considered to be closely connected with xenophobia. So look what I'm doing. As I'm reading this sentence, I am actually using my own simple words to translate the sentence. And when I do that, it gets registered in my mind. Okay, and in my notes, I can simply write EC and others linked with XP. Okay, so I can simply write that in my notes. Now, a complex attitude system cum sentiment structure involving aversion, dislike, and antagonism vis-a-vis the strange and everything that the stranger or alien represents. Oh, I read quite a bit of information. So let me break it down a little bit more. So look here, I am reading this information, then I'm rereading it, and that's absolutely fine. Okay. So let me read it again. A complex attitude system cum sentiment structure. So I can simply convert this into some kind of structure. Okay. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 words can be simplified into some kind of structure. Involving aversion or dislike. I can simplify this as hatred. Involving hatred and antagonism, hatred. Involving hatred, some kind of structure involving hatred vis-a-vis the strange, towards the strange, or the alien, or towards someone that I don't know, and everything that the stranger or the alien represents. So again, all of this is kind of, I won't say redundant, but for the sake of my summarizing the passage, all I can say is that xenophobia is a complex system that involves hatred towards the strange, towards the alien. Okay, so that's my summary of this part over here. How many of you were able to summarize this part in this manner? The part that I just did, the definition of XP. Okay, good. Then I read further. Now, one more thing. The definition of XP, is that a fact or is that an opinion? Is that a fact, yes or no? Yes, it's a fact. Absolutely right. Now let's read further. Some sociocultural anthropologists. Now notice the word some. This means that the author is now presenting information about certain experts. Okay. Some sociocultural anthropologists even considered XP and EC opposite sides of the same coin. Okay. What does opposite sides of the same coin mean in the context of this passage? In the context of what we are reading, what does opposite sides of the same coin mean? Remember, I'm saying in the context of this passage. They are related to each other if they coexist. That's what it means in the context of this passage. The author started the passage saying that EC is intimately connected with XP. Okay, that's what the author said. And then he's saying that there are some, according to some experts, then he's saying there are some people who even think that they are opposite sides of the same coin, who even think that they coexist. Opposite sides of the same coin are always exist together, right? If there's heads, there has to be tails. Okay, so remember I asked you in the context of this passage. Okay, and then take a hint from the word even. Even the author has written the word even, meaning implying that he wants to present something that's an extreme, that's taking whatever he has said so far to another extreme, to one more extreme level. Okay, that's why he's saying even. They are not just connected to each other, they actually coexist. That's what some experts think. Okay, but a few voices have cautioned that this need not be the case. Now he is presenting views of some other set of experts who are saying that this need not be the case. Now, what does this imply here? What does this imply here? This specifically refers to them not being the opposite, them being the opposite sides of the same coin. Exactly. So these, so they do not coexist. Absolutely right. So there are some people, some experts who think that they coexist, but there are few people who think, who caution that no, they do not coexist. Okay. So overall, in this passage, what we have learned is that the author presents a new term, that is XP. He defines a new term. Okay. He says that some experts think that EC and XP coexist, but then he says that some people think that this need not be the case. Okay. And there was one more thing from the first line of the passage. EC are considered to be EC and XP are considered to be intimately connected. Okay. There are some experts who think that EC and XP are closely connected. Now, if you think about it, Actually, let me write this down as well. Okay, so this is also there from the passage. That some experts think that EC and XP are closely connected. Okay, now tell me, the author has presented views of three different set of experts. Now tell me, or three, they may be interlinked as they may be overlapping as well. But has the author said which set of experts he agrees with? Yes or no? Has the author presented his take on any of these viewpoints? No, he hasn't. Okay, which means that if any of these three, the first, this one over here, or EC and XP coexist, or EC and XP do not coexist, appear in an inference question as a possible answer choice, they would not be correct. Those choices would not be correct. Okay, so for you to answer an inference question correctly, it's very important for you to understand, when you're understanding the passage, you need to know whose viewpoint is the author presenting. Okay, and is the author giving his take on that viewpoint or not? What is a fact versus what's an opinion in the passage? So those things, those thoughts should continually go on in your mind as you are looking at as you're reading the passage. Okay, you have to focus on words such as some. I mean, even though they may seem very inconsequential, but these words, these little words are very, very important because they tell you whose viewpoint the author is presenting. Okay, how many of you today pay attention to such small words? Okay, good. So I want all of you to start paying attention to them as well. Okay, all of you as well to start paying attention. So we've already covered this. What is the correct inference? It's always from the point of view of the author. It cannot be something on which the author has not given any opinion. The author agrees with the facts since he's a sensible person. So a fact from the passage can be a correct inference. Okay. Now, let's answer the question. And I'm going to bring about the poll again. And we don't really need to go through each and every answer choice. Xenophobia and EC are different facets of the same concept. No, this is, the author has not given any opinion on that, so you cannot infer that. Okay. Xenophobia entails dislike towards the strange. This is summary of the definition that the author has presented of XP. So this is correct. It's a fact. The author always agrees with the facts. Choice C, xenophobia and EC are not connected with each other. This is not even given in the passage. Um, Canonical variants of ethnocentrism are closely connected with xenophobia. This is the first line, but that's a deemed view. The author has not given his take on it, so this cannot be inferred. In some cases, xenophobia could be the cause of ethnocentrism. There is no causal relationship whatsoever in the passage, so choice E is not correct. So the correct answer here was only choice B. Okay. So at this point in time, I want to make sure that you all understand that what is important. Okay. I'm going to skip through a few slides here because just give me 1 minute here. Just give me a few seconds. Let me get to the right slide here. Yeah. So the main thing that's very important for you to understand is, instead of spending the time, and let me go back over here. When you read the passage, when you give yourself enough time to read the passage. Now I've used 2.5 minutes because I was using a short passage as an example. Okay. But instead of but if you spend more time in reading the passage, you can take away time from the answer choices because you won't have to do a whole lot of back and forth. Okay, that is when you'll be able to read through the passage and answer the questions with higher accuracy. Okay, your total time to answer the passage still remains the same. All you're doing is you are redistributing the time that you spent today. How many of you, okay, so let me ask you this question. How many of you spent more time with the questions than with the passage? When I say that, what I mean is that you have the passage and then you have these three or four questions. So what I'm asking you is, today, how many of you spend more time? You've invested about 6 minutes of your time for this particular passage, or let's say more realistic is 8 minutes. Okay. Actually, let me get information from you instead of assuming. So how much time today do you spend on a typical RC passage? Because we'll be talking in terms of proportions, so you can just tell me overall how much time. Okay, so whatever time you've specified, just in general, whatever time you've specified, keep that in your mind. And then tell me, out of that particular time, what percentage of your time do you spend once you start looking at the question? So you have the passage, you have the first question. So when you start looking at the question, how much time do you spend on the questions out of the whatever time you spend on the whole passage? And let me get you poll here. I'll put in some percentages. So give me 1 second here. Percent allocation, because that's the crux of the process or the crux of the outcome of the process. So more than 50%. So it's just two choices here. So more than 60% of time on questions or less than 60% of time on questions. Okay, let me change the poll. Let me do it 50% of time. Okay, now tell me. Now what I want you to make sure that when you start reading the question, okay, when you go back to the passage, that time is still considered towards that question. Okay. So I want you guys to change that approach. You need to be spending only 30% of your total time on questions. Okay, only 30% of your total time should be spent on questions. The remaining 70% should be spent on you reading the passage. Okay, that's the timing shift that I want you guys to apply. Okay, because if you spend more time on the passage, you automatically ensure that you don't have to spend time on reading the questions. Okay. So again, the key to success is comprehending the passage in the first go. And to do that, you need to read slowly and you need to apply the reading strategies. GMAT RC can definitely be mastered. Read slowly and focus on comprehension. Now, at this point in time, I want to share with you another success story. And this is a comeback story of a student who was unable to do well because of RC and was eventually able to ace the GMAT because she mastered GMAT RC. In her first attempt, she bombed her RC. Okay, and she would say, I would come across an RC in the middle of my marks and I would feel low and lose time and thereby end up rushing through my SC and CR questions as well. Okay, so she messed up her CR and SC because of RC. And then she changed her attitude towards GMAT RC. She decided to get immersed in the passage, and as she got immersed, she found comprehending much more easy. She was able to take good notes and get more and more questions correct. This strategy, while time consuming in the learning phase, helped her improve her verbal score to V41, that is 94 percentile on the GMAT verbal. Okay, so feel free to go through her review on GMAT Club. In fact, this is exactly what Arjun did. He took the GMAT 3 times and he was unable to improve his verbal score. He did everything that he could. RC was his main point, and his final attempt, he applied the reading strategies. He did not do anything differently from what we did in this webinar. He applied the reading strategies and focused on gaining complete comprehension. Okay. He stayed calm and he focused on learning. And this is not me as an instructor who's telling you. This is a student who has toiled through the process. Definitely open the interview after the session and go through the interview. And what was the result? He got V41 in his final attempt. So he went from 40 percentile in verbal to V41, which is 91 percentile in his fourth attempt. Okay. So this is the magic that's possible, but there are no tricks. What you need to do is work diligently and toil through the process. So now let me give you the complete plan for RC. How is it that you can prepare for RC? The first and the foremost thing that you have to do is you have to improve your comprehension. Okay. The next thing that you do is you learn the question types. You learn how to answer questions based on the information that you've learned. The third thing is that you practice in the right manner. And we have dedicated modules in our course that help you build each of these 3 skills. The first one, dedicated skill building. The first thing that you have to do is you have to go through Master Comprehension course. This course helps you understand how is it that you should be, when is it that you should be pausing as you're reading a long sentence? How is it that you should be assimilating the meaning of that long sentence? Remember, our first reading strategy was understand the sentence structure. That was on the sentence level. This course helps you do just that. How is it that you understand the meaning of the sentence in the first read itself? Okay. Once you build this foundation skill, you then go through 3 reading strategies, concept files in the reading comprehension course. Okay. In these concept files, what we do is we go through passages in the manner that you would be going through, and we ask you questions as you are reading the passage so that we build that skill set for you. Okay, as you're going through that question. So we essentially, the way I was asking you questions in this session, it's you add maybe 10 times more interactivity to that, and that's what you're going to see in the reading strategies concept files. And once you go through these files, you'll have a solid idea of how is it that you should be questioning yourself as you are reading the passage. Okay, so think about this as guided practice. Okay. Once you go through these 3 concept files, you then apply those on 3 practice files. Okay. And so essentially you get a total of 8 passages with rigorous application of reading strategies. By the time you end this foundation modules in reading comprehension course, you are going to have a very solid idea of how is it that you should be reading the passages. Okay. Now, once you do that, you then need to, ultimately, you have to solve questions, right? So you have to understand how is it that you should be approaching the questions that are asked to you. So you go through, we have specialized concept files and practice files for each question type. For main point, we have 2 concept files, and then we have 2 practice files. For inference, we have 3 concept files, and then we have 2 practice files. Same thing holds true for detail and for structure. Okay, so now by the time you end this, you reach the end of this part of the course, you will have a very solid understanding of how is it that you need to answer each and every type of question that is asked in the GMAT RC. Okay. Now, your journey towards acing GMAT RC does not end here. It's very important for you to understand that learning is iterative. Don't expect that you end at this point, you will be at 90 percentile ability in RC. No. Till this point, you have learned all there is to learn about how is it that you should be approaching RC. Now you have to take these learnings and you have to do dedicated practice. For that, you have 4 application files in the course, and then you have passages in Scholaranium, about more than 40 passages, which allow you to build 10 ability quizzes. And these RC passages have uniform coverage across all the genres, okay, humanities, sciences, economics, and business, okay. So essentially what you're doing over here is you've learned the concepts in the first and second phases. In the third phase, you are practicing with the right kind of content. You have brilliantly curated solutions that you can look at after you have solved the question, and you can understand where is it that you faltered. You take that feedback and then you apply that feedback in the next set of questions that you solve. Okay. Any questions regarding this? Any questions regarding the study plan? Okay, good. Let's proceed. Here's another example of a student who made reading strategies a habit. Anastasia is another person who took the GMAT 3 times. She took a private tutor the second time in Moscow. She could not improve. Okay. She took master comprehension course to heart, and successful students do that. They build their foundation skills, how to read to understand the meaning. She also made sure, as Arjun did, to read the passage slowly and only once. That's the power of reading the passage really, really well. The time to answer question comes down because you are so clear about what the passage is what the author is saying. Okay, so really she used to take 3 minutes to read the passage and then less than 45 seconds to select the correct answer. Okay, now you may think that it may take you that much amount of time to go through each and every answer choice, but really when you have a solid understanding of the passage and you read the question, you automatically get the correct answer formulated in your mind. And now when you're going through the answer choices, you are essentially eliminating incorrect answer choices, and you know what to expect from the correct answer choice, and you're selecting that choice. So you're not really reading each and every correct answer choice in the same amount of detail as you're reading the passage, right? Because you already have a very solid idea. Okay. So definitely take a look at her debrief and her video debrief as well. Okay. So again, be diligent, be smart. Don't focus on quantity. Don't do the misstep of timing yourself, and don't rely on tricks. Use the strategies that work. Okay. So let me skip through a few slides here. All right. So the next steps that I would recommend is for e-GMAT students, complete the Master Comprehension course, finish all the reading strategies files, finish all the question related files, complete the application files, and then attend the RC1 and RC2 sessions. Okay. Practice in Scholarium and do the OG quizzes. For those of you who are just registered students, for them, I'm going to recommend you to go through the main point files that are included in your free trial, revise the portions of this recording. Practice in Scholarium, see for yourself the level of detail of solutions that we provide through our Scholarium platform, and then solve official questions. And again, we provide detailed solutions to all official questions. So even when you solve official questions, you will know exactly where you faltered because you'll have those solutions to go through. Okay, and then decide for yourself if you want to invest in the course or not. Okay, so with this, we've come to the end of this webinar, and I would now, let me just skip through these slides here. This is not applicable, and I want to now open the platform for any questions that you may have. And let me get some polls over here and just understand from you how you like the session, what have you learned from this session, because that's really very important. So if you could provide your inputs over here, and let me also get one more poll. All right, great. So, is it recommended to read a book to improve reading speed? Read a book, I guess it depends on what kind of book you're talking about. Essentially, to improve your reading speed is a misnomer, is what I would say. Okay, I would really say that read questions, read a passage which is written in a very structured manner, and look at publications such as New York Times, Economist, Business Week, so that you're reading well-written passages. Remember, these reading strategies apply only on well-written passages. If the passage itself is loosely connected passage, then obviously it's not a good piece of writing on which you can apply these reading strategies. Okay, so that is what I would recommend. Yeah, so the more you read, as you're reading articles, be actively engaged in the passage. That is what is going to help you with it. Okay, what details in the passage can we skim read? Again, it varies. Skimming details is something which I frankly, um, well, I hate to say this, that I don't recommend. But as you are reading the passage, don't think about identifying the details. Don't think about skipping a certain part. What is important is that you understand the role played by a certain entity, and that's something which you're going to see in the detail concept files. How do you identify the detail is something which you have to learn, right? So that's a skill that you're going to build when you go through the detail concept files. Essentially, the key thing here is, if I were to summarize that, is that you understand the role played by a certain section of the passage, and then you decide, do you need to go through that section in that much detail at that point in time or not? Or is it enough for you to come back to that portion if a question is asked pertaining to that? Okay. Let me take some other question. Can you suggest any best online resources for RC, the e-GMAT course? What is the process of elimination? Process of elimination is when you have a good idea about, when you read the question, if you have a solid understanding of the passage, when you read the question, the answer automatically comes in your mind. You pre-think the answer, and that happens intuitively. Now, when you're looking at each of the answer choices, for example, if we go back to the main point question, when you look at to define, you don't even have to read the rest of the sentence, because you know that the author's purpose is not to define. Or when you see to evaluate, you automatically know that the author's purpose is not to evaluate, because he's not doing any pros and cons discussion in the passage. So that's when you're simply eliminating the incorrect answer choices on solid grounds. Okay. I always feel like taking notes is a waste of time, as it's impossible to write down the exact information that some questions refer to. Not inference questions, but those that refer to certain words. What advice do you have in terms of taking notes and when to take them? Example after every paragraph. A very good question, and a lot of people have that question, that how should we take notes? And it's a very individualistic approach that you need to apply. I have a certain way of taking notes. Shraddha has certain other ways of taking notes. Rajat has certain other ways of taking notes. And I'm just using our instructors as examples, because we are all experts in RC, but we have a different way of taking notes. Okay. I write down a lot of notes. Rajat hardly takes down any notes. And Shraddha is somewhere in the middle of the two of us. The thing about this is, you are understand the purpose behind taking notes. No one is going to come and check your notes. You take down notes so that you are sure that you've understood the information. Okay. The act of writing down actually solidifies that particular aspect in your mind. Okay. And I write down a lot, and that's why it helps me solidify that information in my mind. Okay. Rajat is able to absorb a lot of information right off the bat. That's why he doesn't really need to write down so much. So it all depends upon how your brain works, and everyone's brain works in a certain manner, right? So that's why you have to understand, there is no single strategy for how to take notes, when to take notes. Ultimately, the goal of taking notes is to make sure that you understand the passage. That is the end goal. Now, for that, if you as a person needs to take down notes in shorthand and that's enough for you, that is well and good. If you as a person needs to take down notes, writing down, things in your own words, that is also up to you. Okay. I hope that answers your question. I'm unable to understand the meaning of few words. What to do in that case? Very good question. And again, we do have a reading strategy pertaining to that, which is how do you infer information from the past? How do you infer meaning of the words that are unfamiliar to you? So again, the thing would be it depends on the question. It's the word itself. More often than not, and I'm going to say maybe 95% of the times, the test maker doesn't really, actually, the test maker is not testing your vocabulary. The test maker doesn't want you to have a super duper great vocabulary. All he's trying to make sure is that given the context, can you understand the meaning of the word? Okay. For example, schismatic, that was a very complicated word. And frankly, I haven't even opened up the dictionary to find the meaning of that word because I want to, I mean, that's one word that's always going to elude me because I don't want to know the meaning of the word because I don't need to in the context of this passage. Again, I don't want to give myself undue advantage by knowing the meaning of the word and saying that I don't know the meaning, right? So there are certain words in the passage for which you can simply substitute. For example, we did some kind of in-group outgroup differentiation. You can do that and you can still understand the gist of the passage. There are certain other words that you may need to infer the meaning of, and the author of the passage gives you enough context in the passage so for you to be able to do that. Okay. How do you tackle questions that ask you about specific lines in a paragraph? Would you have to reread the entire paragraph? You wouldn't have to reread the entire paragraph. If the certain lines of paragraph are highlighted, then when you read the passage the first time, you already registered in your mind or in your notes what was the high level, what was the role played by those lines. Now, when a detailed question has been asked, you definitely should go back to those lines and read those lines again because now you have a specific question to answer based on those lines. Okay. So first refer to your notes or first get from your mind as to what was the role played by those sentences. Then if you still need to go back to those lines to answer the question, definitely go back. But if the RC has 4 to 5 paragraphs, then it would take a lot of time for understanding every detail. Again, as I said, you don't really have to understand every detail. For example, if there is something specified about the working of a certain enzyme in a bio passage, right, in a biosciences passage, as long as and that's just one of the aspects of the passage. Maybe the passage is about the whole mechanism and then enzyme is just one cog in the entire wheel, then you don't really need to understand exactly how that enzyme works, but you need to know that that particular detail is present in that particular section of the passage so that when a question is asked, you can definitely go back and now answer the question and now read through that detail in a proper manner. So my whole point with detail is, and again, all of these things are going to be solidified a lot better once you go through the detail concept file in the RC course. But the whole point is that you need to understand the role played by that particular section. Okay, and then you decide, do you need to invest time right now or later on? And this comes with practice. Okay, I'm not saying that today I've just told you this and you'll be able to implement that in the next passage that you read. Okay. I'm left with 30 days before my GMAT. Can you please suggest how many RC passages should I read on a daily basis? My level on RC is not that good. For you, what I would recommend is go through the course in the right manner. It's not the quantity that matters. It's the quality of your review that matters. Okay. So go through the course, learn the strategies. That is absolutely critical. Okay. People have mastered RC in as few as 5 days if you focus on it properly. So what I would suggest is don't, again, your question itself is not a valid question because your understanding of how to prepare for RC is still not that mature. It's not the quantity that matters. So what I would suggest is go back through the success stories that we have shared with you, look through them, understand how they have prepared so that you don't make the same mistakes. Okay. Are the questions in the OG verbal review and OG quant unique? Definitely they are unique. I thought you meant, okay, maybe you meant OG verbal review and OG 2019. They have unique questions. Can I get more practice by purchasing? Yeah, you definitely would get more practice by purchasing the verbal review and quant review separately. Okay. Read the question first and then passage? Not at all. Always read the passage first. I don't ever recommend reading the question first, because as soon as you read the question first, you already have formulated some idea in your mind that this is what you're finding the answer for, and that is not correct at all. First, read the passage. Good that you asked that question. Um, All right, so now I think I've answered most of the questions here. So if you guys have any other questions not related to reading comprehension, so let me just clear out all these questions now. So if you have any questions not related to reading comprehension, feel free to post them over here, and I'm going to invite Rajat back into the webinar so that he can take those questions from you. All right, so good luck, and I wish you all the very best, and keep us posted about how you're doing in RC or or towards your GMAT prep in general, and let us know how we can help you. Bye-bye.
Right, guys, with that, we are in that open-ended Q&A part of the webinar. Let me share the session PDF and the batch calendars. Just as a reminder, we will start our next batches in about a week or so. And again, if you want to join the batch, I would recommend you do that by the middle of the week. That way, it'll allow you to get enough time to prepare for the first sessions. And I also want to thank you guys for the ratings. I can see that about 41% of you rated it as 10 out of 10. The other 41% rated it as 9 out of 10. That's really good. If you have any further questions, I'd be happy to answer those questions. You can post those questions in the Q&A pod. All right, yes. So if you've joined using a tablet, you probably won't be able to download the session PDF. In that case, we would be sending the session PDF in the email. You'd be able to download the same from there. So again, people joining using a phone or a tablet would not be able to do so. Unfortunately, it's one of the shortcomings of the Adobe Connect app. So I have another question, which is, does sub-vocalization hamper RC efficiency? Not really. I think it's a good idea. Sub-vocalization is essentially when you're saying the words in your head while reading something, and I think that is a good way to make sure that when you're reading something, you comprehend it, because by saying it in your head, you give your brain a bit more time to process that information. One of the things that I'm sure Payal mentioned in the earlier part of the webinar is, if you comprehend, you're not going to fall short on time, just because there is ample time. So another question, Tanya says, apart from the GMAT letters of recommendation and SOP, well, GMAT doesn't require, or MBA doesn't require SOP. It requires an entire application, and SOP is a single document. But I get what you're saying are equally important. How can you get help on those? So if you think about the various pieces of your application, they're essentially at a high level, um, 5 different pieces. But if you go deep dive into it, there are about 8 to 9 pieces of your application. You basically have your essays, in which most important thing is why MBA and why this particular school. You have your letter of recommendation and the other leadership based questions, which also go around the letter of recommendation. You have the GMAT, you have the interview, and you have the other parts of the application which are not covered in these essays or LORs. And if you think about the aspects of interview that are variable, you have to the aspects of your application that are variable. You have two variable aspects. One is the GMAT, the other one's the interview. Other than that, everything else was more or less fixed. Your essays would be what your essays are from the realm of the experience. Now, there's a lot of depending on how good you are or how well you understand the questions, your answers can vary, but they are always picked out from the realm of experiences you have. For our students who basically need help with these things, we connect with you with some of the best admission consultants out there. We also frequently connect webinars on these things, but we don't directly offer these services. It's not something that uh, at this point in time we want to spend our energy doing. So, but I mean, if there's an admission consultant worth his or her ability, we do work with them and we can refer you to those folks. Is a master's in finance worth it? If yes, is UK better or US? Is it worth it? If that's what you want to do, then definitely it's worth it. I think the question really is that what you want to do? And if you want to do, then there's a market for it. The other piece is UK better or US? Again, they're excellent colleges in both locations. It just depends on the college that you want to go to, the kind of professors you want to work with. I think what's relevant for you if you want to work in private equity or investment banking. London's really good, New York's really good. So Stern, LBS are really good schools overall. And is one better than the other? I don't think you should even worry about it. Shank says in the GLP calendar, there's we have verbal and then quant. Can we start with quant first? Absolutely. So when you buy our courses, you get access for 6 months. We start a batch every 15 to 20 days, and so you can do quant first and then start with the next batch for verbal. You're not going to pay extra. So we give you guys a lot of flexibility with regards to doing this, and that's how we get about 800 students a month or so, and that's how we cater to the needs of those students. Is there a fixed number of questions in SCCR and RC that appear in verbal? More or less. On the verbal side, out of 36, you're likely to see between 9 to 11 critical reasoning, about 12 to between 12 and 14 reading comprehension, and the remaining sentence correction. So that's this number more or less fixed, but there is a range. It's not fixed completely. What are the qualifying details for IR and AWA? I mean, we have the world's best IR course. If you buy any of our courses, you do get that. Again, you want to know about how they are scored, you can really look at our blogs. Here is a blog on how do you get a perfect 6 on AWA. Saket says I'm getting 44 out of 48 correct. What would be my percentile in quant? So Saket, when you get that, you can actually go to the OG key, and they will tell you what your score out of 60 is, and when that's your ability score, and based on that score out of 60, you can look at what percentile does it correspond to currently. And that's kind of where the currently piece is really important. So the scores out of 60 don't change over years. The percentiles change depending on the mix of test takers who take the GMAT. Do IR and AW get validated? AW gets validated. IR is just, I mean, if there's a correct answer, there's an incorrect answer, but an AWA goes through to, an automated checker, and then a human checker, and if they conflict, then another human checker takes a look at the AWS score. So that's how they get the AWS score gets validated. All right, guys, with that, it seems that there's no other question. I want to thank you guys for spending time with us today. Once again, make sure you go through the prerequisites. Also, make sure that you attend the webinar tomorrow, which is your quant workshop overall. Thank you very much. Another question, are there certain minimum scores in IR and AWA? No one officially publishes them, but yes, if you score really low on an AWA and your essays are flawless, B schools will worry about the originality of your essays. Similarly, the IR score is not something which will push your candidacy, but if you're applying to a top school and if your IR score is less than 5, they will worry about your ability to handle data. So don't get a score lower than 5. I would recommend a 7 or an 8. And it's not that difficult to get that score. All right, guys, with that, thank you very much. Have a good day and study well for your GMAT.